How's it going, everyone? My name is True Underdog, and I've been making fighting game videos for about 10 years now, and before that, I was a big lover of comic books. So recently, I decided to take my two passions and combine them together to create Top Tier, the first ever independent fighting game comic created entirely for fighting game players and the fighting game community. In total, the comic is about 40 pages long, the main story itself is a bit over 30 pages, and then afterwards there's concept art for the characters, setting, and all that awesome stuff. Honestly, it's more like a mini graphic novel when you think about it, because 40 pages is a lot for a comic book. But I think you guys deserve it. You've been watching my channel and supporting me for 10 years straight, so I wanted to give you the most I could with this first comic, which is why I'm also including the trading cards for free. No matter which package you choose to buy on the Indiegogo, you get 6 trading cards for free. However, that's just the start. If we reach the $5,000 milestone, I'll add 4 new cards for free, no extra charge. And then if we manage to reach the $10,000 milestone, there's 4 more cards on top of that, once again, no extra charge to you. Or in other words, the more people we can get to buy this comic means the more free stuff that you get, which is why I encourage everybody to spread the word to everyone they know, anyone who loves comics or anyone who loves fighting games. That's the best way to ensure you get even more free stuff for your initial purchase. You can buy just the one comic, but then get 12 extra cards for free on top of that. I apologize if I sound out of breath or nervous in this video. This comic book is the most ambitious thing I've ever done in my life. When I started this YouTube channel about 10 years ago, I never dreamed that it would get this big. Even as a really small child, I would get home from school every day and play Dead or Alive, or challenge my siblings to Street Fighter 2 and lose because I was the youngest kid. But even so, the button masher in me was strong, so I kept going and tried to get better and better at the fighting games I loved so much, even as a wee baby. And then years later in high school, I came across a channel called Bayrudy, and that man is the one who inspired me to start a channel, because he was having such a good time in every one of his videos, and on top of that, he turned that joy into a career, and there's nothing more inspiring than that. Right then and there, I knew what I wanted to be. I wanted to create a YouTube channel around fighting games. Because let's be honest, fighting games are hard. They've gotten easier over the years, but man, they've always been difficult for new players to get into, and that's why I started my channel. I wanted to make it easier to understand how to play fighting games and also enjoy yourself while doing it, because fighting games are fun. They're the most fun video games in my honest opinion, but you have to understand how to play them and get good at them, which is quite the hurdle when you're starting out. So that's my story, the history behind the creation of True Underdog Gaming, and a bit more about the author who wrote Top Tier. But next up, I wanted to talk to you about the inspiration behind my comic, the reason I made Top Tier and also went public with it. Because believe it or not, I've got a confession, this is not the first comic book I've made. I actually have 3 other comics that are completely done, but I was too nervous to ever go public with them. And that's for a couple of reasons. Number one, I've never been very good at selling things. I guess it just doesn't come very natural to me. But then on top of that, the story setting just didn't match with my channel that well, and that's when I decided, why not just make a fighting game comic book? I make fighting game videos, so make a fighting game themed comic, and that's how Top Tier was born. If you're gonna build a channel on fighting games and spend 10 years covering fighting games and making fighting game guides, then why not just make a comic that's based around what you know, the fighting games that I love so much? That was the initial inspiration behind Top Tier, but trust me, the overall plot and concept has changed a lot since then. Because originally it was kind of like Toy Story. What did these video game characters in this fighting game do when they're not being used by the player? And then when they are picked by the player, how do they feel about having to fight their friends against their will? How do they feel about being shoved into goofy DLC costumes? That was the original idea behind Top Tier, and the script was already halfway done before I decided, what if the fighting game characters were real? What if a meter system was an actual thing in their real life that exists in their universe? How could I take that mechanic and make it feel natural in the real world? In other words, how could I take fighting game concepts but make them believable in a real setting? So for example, let's take Ryu. This man fights day in and day out to get stronger, but realistically, if you fought every single day, you just wouldn't be alive by the end of the month. Your body would be too destroyed, and you certainly couldn't keep training at the very least. So if Ryu from Street Fighter was a real person, he would be dead, unless, what if the arena was magic, and every time you left the arena after a fight, it healed your wounds instantly? That's exactly what happens in Top Tier, and it explains why these characters can fight all the time but still not hate each other, because none of the damage is ever permanent. Once again, it's fighting games but real life. These characters love to fight day in and day out, but they also use these fights to settle disputes or to end beef between their rivals. And all of that is possible because the arena is magic and heals their wounds after every single fight. There's no long-term consequences, but there's tons of room for character growth and development. development. But that's just one example. There's so many other things I wanted to incorporate from fighting games but make it feel realistic and believable in an actual world. So another great example is a balance patch, because every recent fighting game goes through drastic changes and updates which reset the character's strengths. The characters that are too strong get nerfed, and the weaker characters get made stronger so more people will use them. So once again, how do I take that concept and make it real? Well, how about a world-changing event, a massive thunderstorm where the lightning seeks out the strongest players on purpose, and upon being struck, they're made physically weaker. In other words, they get nerfed, whereas the weaker characters get bathed in a glowing light that actually makes them stronger, or in other words, they get buffed. This world-changing phenomenon is a big plot point for issue 1, because now the balance has been completely offset. Some of the really strong characters who were big bullies are now getting humbled because they're weaker, whereas the weaker characters are now finally standing up for themselves and winning fights to gain respect among their peers. Once again, the idea is to take fighting game elements but then translate them into a real world in a way that's believable, which leads me to one of my favorite concepts in Top Tier, a great reveal at the very end. Because if these video game characters are made real and these balance updates are actually world-changing weather phenomenons, then what would that make the developers? They can't just be game programmers anymore because it's real, so instead they're these mysterious beings with untold levels of power. They can create life, they can create worlds, and then change the power level of these beings to suit their grand design. All the time behind the scenes, they're the puppet masters pulling the strings, which on the one hand makes them mysterious and cool, but also pretty creepy in a horror movie kind of sense, because they wield powers that seem infinite and incomprehensible, and at the end of the day, they're using this power to manipulate people in a way that makes it entertaining for them. All of this happens in issue 1, by the way. Yeah, it's a jam-packed issue. There's so many things that happen, and I haven't even gone into detail of the characters and how they have beef and how they interact with each other in the first issue. That's going to be a surprise for you when you first read it. So I'm going to let that keep being a mystery, but if this campaign does well, and I really hope that it does, I already have plans for issue 2, where the tier list itself as a concept is made real. Instead of just being how players rank their favorite video game characters based on their strength and versatility, the tier list itself is a hierarchy. It's a caste system, a social currency, if you will, because life is only good for the top tier players. They have the best housing, the best food, the best experience overall, but the low tier characters get like next to nothing. They're pretty much homeless and have to go without most of the time, and every day just to survive is a struggle. And that's because in a world where fighting is the most important thing, of course celebrities would be the greatest fighters on the planet. And as a result, they enjoy all the luxuries where the lower tier fighters have to go without and struggle every single day. Which is not good, but that's the point, right? The weaker characters are going to destroy and dismantle the tier list and this oppressive hierarchy. But alright everyone, I've been rambling for about 25 minutes now. I really hope you enjoyed my story, the history of my channel, and what inspired me to make Top Tier. And now that you know more details about the comic and its characters and also what's to come in the future, I sincerely hope you click that link down below and purchase your own copy of issue 1 today. Because once again, it's such a good deal. You get 40 pages of awesomeness for just $15, along with 6 trading cards for free, and that's just the start. As mentioned earlier, there's way more free stuff if we come together as a fighting game community and support this project. I really want to make an issue 2 and an issue 3. I've already written the script, so I really hope this campaign does well. Please reach out to everyone you know who loves comics or fighting games, and let's make Top Tier the first of many great comic books inspired by the fighting games that we know and love. My name is True Underdog, I cover fighting games, and I love writing comic books. I sincerely hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.